Okay, so this is the answer key that you should have for both of the uses of imperfect and preterite. You should have number 1 in the imperfect category, and you're going to use imperfect for any time you use this phrase, once upon a time. I know it can be a little tricky because we think, oh, once, it only happened once, but that's not the case. In Spanish, they say había una vez, so that would be the reason that you could put here. Había una vez is always going to be imperfect. Okay, so that's the way you would start a story, and you have to use the imperfect tense. Then you have number 2. Her name was Cinderella. This reason for the imperfect was description. Whenever you're describing a character in your story or whatever, you're going to be using this imperfect tense. Okay, so se llamaba Cenicienta would be whenever you name someone in a story, you're going to have to use the imperfect. So make sure that you put a little note there in your categories there. Cinderella was pretty. Same thing. Anytime you have an adjective, you're describing a person. So description is a reason for the imperfect. So you would say, La Cenicienta era bonita. So when you have adjectives in the past, you want to make sure that you use the imperfect tense. She lived with her stepmother and stepsisters. This is background info. So wherever she lived, we don't know how long she lived there for. It's background information to the story. So you would say, vivía con su madrastra y hermanastra. Okay, so these are all imperfect reasons. So if you've forgotten some of these, you should be taking notes now so that we can go over all those reasons again. Whenever you see the word every day, that is a key word for the imperfect tense. Cinderella did all the housework every day. It's a habitual action. She did it all the time. So whenever you have a habitual action, you're going to be using the imperfect tense. So you could say, todos los días, okay, todos los días, ella limpiaba la casa. All right, so again, using the imperfect for that. So let's go over to the reasons for the preterite here. There were only 2 really that were in this example that we had. So el pretérito, you have number 6, because the letter arrived one day. Okay, the answer was a completed action, and the key word that you have is one day, un día. So if you say un día llegó una carta, okay, completed action, one day it arrived. So that's a reason for the preterite. Number 9, when all of a sudden a fairy godmother appeared. This is a split sentence. If you look at the other part of the sentence, okay, Cinderella was crying. This is missing here from the answer key. Cinderella was crying would go under the imperfect. Okay, Cinderella was crying when all of a sudden a fairy godmother appeared. You have this example of an action in progress. So usually I'll make like a little squiggly line so that we realize that this is happening. Cinderella's crying when all of a sudden, and this is like your lightning bolt, all of a sudden the fairy godmother appeared. The appearance of the godmother is the interruption to the action that was in progress, the crying. So if you have a sentence where you have 2 of those types of actions, you have the in progress action and then the interruption, you have 2 different tenses. You have the imperfect for the in progress and you have the preterite for the interruption. So overall, that sentence would look like this. Cinderella estaba llorando, so you could say estaba llorando, and you would put that over here. Okay, that's the imperfect. And notice that I made the imperfect, this is actually, remember we did present progressive a while back. You can make this still that kind of idea of the ing, but in the past, just by making the estar in the imperfect tense. You can also say lloraba. Both of them are pretty much the same idea. So estaba llorando or lloraba, that's your imperfect part of the sentence. Now you have the interruption when all of a sudden, and this is a great transition word, de repente, all of a sudden, su madrina apareció. Okay, so this appearance, this is going to be in your preterite tense, so that we can make that distinction. Okay, so the crying is the imperfect, and then the actual interruption, the godmother appearing, is going to be in the preterite. So this is one of the tricky ones because it has two different tenses. You just have to pay attention to which one is the in progress action, which one is the interruption, and that way you can make your distinction. The last one is Cinderella was sad. So if you look at reasons from last year, this being sad is an emotion. So you're going to have that in the imperfect part of your chart. So Cinderella was sad. You could say estaba triste. More often than not, you're going to be having emotions as being used with the imperfect tense. Okay, so this is the first part. So check your work, see if you got most of them. If you had a few that you were mixed up with, we need to go over all the reasons now for the imperfect and then also the preterite tense. So if you'd like, see if you can use some of these things to fill in the bottom part of page 21. What are some uses of the imperfect that we just discussed? What are some uses of the preterite that we just discussed? And let's see if you get them right when we go over it in the next part.